Vault-Tech's presence across the wasteland feels less like a company and more like a memory that refuses to fade, lingering in steel doors and fluorescent corridors long after the last overseer fell silent. Every vault seems to hum with its own strange intentions, as though each one was designed with a quiet personality shaped by secrets buried behind layers of concrete. Wanderers often wonder whether these underground shelters were ever meant to save anyone at all, or if their creators built them with the hope that humanity's future would emerge from deeper shadows than the world understood. Some theories suggest that Vault-Tec designed every vault to observe not only behavior under pressure, but the invisible ways emotions change when the world above is gone. The lighting, the temperature, even the cadence of the air purifiers might have been tuned to influence residents in ways subtle enough to go unnoticed, yet powerful enough to shape generations. The hum in every vault, that deep, low vibration that fills the hallways, has long fascinated travelers. Though officially described as ventilation and power systems running beneath the walls, some theorists believe the hum carries coded audio meant to manipulate the subconscious mind. The idea imagines pre-war scientists embedding emotional cues into the resonance, guiding vault dwellers toward calmness, obedience, suspicion, or courage, depending on the experiment's intention. People who grew up in vaults often feel a strange homesickness when they hear similar sounds elsewhere, like generators or air filtration units, as though their minds recognize an artificial heartbeat. This theory hints that Vault-Tec understood human psychology deeply enough to write emotions into frequency, shaping future societies through sound alone. Others believe that the iconic vault doors were never meant to be opened from the inside. The oversized circular mechanisms, the hydraulic clamps, the heavy gears, these feel designed to intimidate, as though the door itself was a participant in the experiment. According to this theory, the door represented not safety but control, a giant metal reminder that the world outside was forbidden until Vault-Tec or fate decided otherwise. The symbolism of a vault door opening is powerful, civilization emerging from the dark into ruins shaped by fire and time. But the idea that these doors were intentionally restrictive suggests the company wanted its experiments contained long enough to observe long-term psychological shifts. The sealed vault wasn't a shelter, it was a chrysalis, and Vault-Tec wanted to watch humanity molt in slow motion. Some theorists propose that every vault's experiment was only part of a vast interconnected network, an algorithm designed to generate the perfect society. The vaults weren't individual projects, but pieces of a puzzle, each testing different variables: cooperation, scarcity, isolation, leadership, rebellion, so that when the world inevitably ended, the data could be merged into one grand solution. This theory imagines Vault-Tec as an organization obsessed with shaping the future rather than preserving the present. The company may have believed that a new world could only be built if humanity was broken down and rebuilt in controlled environments. Vault dwellers were prototypes, molded in social pressure cookers, observed like ingredients in a recipe being perfected across the continent. There's a haunting belief that some vaults intentionally introduced environmental scents or chemical pheromones through their ventilation systems. According to this idea, Vault-Tec tested how artificial aromas influence decision-making, conflict resolution, or emotional bonding. Certain vaults always smelled faintly metallic, others medicinal, and some carried a curious floral scent not found anywhere in the wasteland. Wanderers who visited these vaults reported different emotional reactions. Some vaults felt eerily calm, others unbearably tense. If true, this chemical influence would imply Vault-Tec orchestrated entire social climates through scent, turning vaults into emotional ecosystems designed to grow specific kinds of people. A softer theory proposes that many vaults were not meant to run for centuries, but to open early, releasing small communities into the wasteland like seeds scattered across barren soil. The vault dwellers, shaped by their controlled environments, were meant to form the early frameworks of post-war civilization. Vault-Tec's archives hint at talk of sustainable repopulation, distributed societal re-anchoring, and cultural seeding, suggesting that humanity's restoration was meant to come not from one place, but from dozens of small starting points. Each vault would produce its own distinct cultural identity, merging slowly over time until a new society emerged from the wastes. The fact that so many vaults malfunctioned, remained sealed, or collapsed is seen by theorists as evidence that the plan was derailed by the chaos of the Great War, leaving only echoes of the intended design. Some wanderers believe that vault jumpsuits weren't simply uniforms, they were psychological tools. Their bright colors, clean lines, and matching patterns created unity through visual identity, flattening individuality into a shared aesthetic. According to this theory, Vault-Tec wanted residents to feel like parts of a single entity rather than individuals, encouraging cooperation and discouraging rebellion. The jumpsuit wasn't just clothing. It was a reminder that everyone was equal in the eyes of Vault-Tec, identical pieces in an experiment meant to test human behavior when individuality is stripped away. The theory suggests that the jumpsuit's design was carefully crafted to evoke innocence, nostalgia, and simplicity, as though vault dwellers were children being gently guided by invisible hands. There's a mysterious idea that vault lights dim at specific intervals, not because of faulty wiring, but because the vaults were designed to simulate natural circadian rhythms. The flicker of fluorescent tubes may replicate the softness of clouds passing over the sun or the settling glow of evening. Some theorists propose that Vault-Tec understood how tightly human psychology is tied to light, using the vault's illumination as a subtle method of behavioral conditioning. Residents raised in these environments may have developed emotional instincts tied to certain shades of light, responding unconsciously to stimuli engineered decades before their birth. In this view, every flicker becomes a whisper from a forgotten experiment, shaping moods and memories through color alone. Another theory imagines that certain vaults contained hidden chambers that never appeared on official maps. Behind sealed panels and false walls could be observation rooms, dormant laboratories, or abandoned prototypes of future experiments. According to this idea, Vault-Tec built redundancies into every vault, giving overseers or hidden scientists emergency spaces to retreat to or observe from without being detected. Some wanderers claim to have found strange architectural inconsistencies, hallways too short for the rooms they connect to, vents that lead nowhere, or inaccessible platforms that seem to serve no purpose. These anomalies fuel speculation that vaults were built with layers of secrecy, allowing unseen observers to monitor or manipulate the experiment from the shadows. A more melancholic theory suggests that some vaults played lullabies during nighttime cycles, soft musical tones woven into the ventilation hum, too quiet to notice consciously, but loud enough to seep into dreams. These melodies may have been composed to soothe anxiety, reduce conflict, or encourage compliance. People raised in vaults often report a peculiar fondness for soft electronic tones, as though their minds recognize an echo from childhood they cannot fully remember. The theory paints Vault-Tec less as a malevolent force and more as an organization trying, in its own twisted way, to comfort the people it imprisoned. The vaults become cradles as much as cages, their walls humming songs designed to protect as much as control. And then there is the belief that some vaults were intentionally connected through underground tunnels stretching miles across the wasteland. These tunnels, now collapsed or flooded, may have been part of a secret transportation network meant for overseers or Vault-Tec officials. According to this theory, the company designed these paths so that certain vaults could be accessed or evacuated discreetly, forming a hidden web beneath the world's feet. The idea imagines overseers traveling through dim underground corridors, carrying data, samples, or classified reports between vaults as the wasteland raged above. If true, the vaults weren't isolated experiments, but nodes in a larger system, connected through unseen arteries of concrete and steel. Vault-Tec's influence stretches across the wasteland like a half-remembered dream, leaving behind clues in hallways that echo with fluorescent hums and ventilation systems that seem to breathe on their own. Some wanderers believe the vaults were not designed as isolated experiments, but as synchronized gears inside one enormous psychological machine. They imagine an invisible network of behavioral pulses traveling through buried cables, each vault contributing emotional data into a larger model that no survivor has ever fully seen. The idea that the vaults might have been communicating silently beneath the surface adds a layer of unease to those steel corridors. It raises the question of whether the overseers ever truly ruled, or if they were following orders arranged long before they were born, part of a choreography built into the concrete itself. Each pressurized door, each flicker of light, each intake of filtered air might have served a purpose far beyond survival, a purpose encoded directly into the infrastructure of Vault-Tec's underground world. Across countless vaults, the identical layout of certain living quarters has sparked theories that Vault-Tec may have been experimenting with architectural memory. Some believe that uniformity wasn't about efficiency or cost, but about creating environments that subtly induce déjà vu, encouraging residents to feel they've lived lives they never actually experienced. Wanderers talk about the odd sensation of walking through Vault 21 after visiting Vault 34, feeling as though the hallways know them somehow, responding to their presence like old friends. One theory suggests this repetition was meant to guide behavior subconsciously, encouraging predictability under stress by designing spaces that felt familiar no matter the vault. The mind finds comfort in echoes, and Vault-Tec might have shaped entire personalities through the quiet, repetitive language of architecture. These vaults weren't just built, they were tuned, humming at the exact frequency needed to shape human instinct. There are strange patterns embedded in the numbering of vaults across the country, and some theorists believe the numbers correspond not to chronological order, but to coded directives. Certain vault numbers appear in ancient American history, mathematical constants, or even mythological references. Vault 111, for example, aligns with a numerological pattern symbolizing isolation and stasis, while Vault 92 mirrors classical notation for unfinished symphonies, an eerie coincidence for a vault obsessed with music. Some think Vault-Tec encoded instructions inside these numbers for employees who knew how to read them, transforming each vault door into a cryptic message. Under this theory, the numbers weren't labels at all. They were warnings, prophecies carved into steel, suggesting the emotional trajectory each vault was designed to follow. Survivors wandering into these vaults unknowingly step into experiments forecasted by symbols they don't understand, walking inside blueprints that predicted not just their actions, but their fate. Deep in the maintenance tunnels of several vaults, machinery hums at frequencies that feel oddly deliberate. Some wanderers report feeling calm near certain engines, while others feel uneasy without knowing why. This has led to speculation that Vault-Tec embedded acoustic manipulation into their designs, soundscapes engineered to influence mood, compliance, or mental resilience. The air recycling units might produce tones tuned to relax residents, making them more likely to accept the vault's rules, while emergency sirens might contain subliminal motifs designed to trigger obedience during crises. According to this theory, Vault Tech didn't just build shelters, they crafted psychological cocoons, shaping emotional landscapes with humming vents and gentle mechanical whispers. If true, then every breath residents took carried an unseen influence, and the vault itself became a soft-spoken overseer, guiding thoughts with vibrations woven into filtered air. Some theorists believe Vault-Tec had access to classified research in predictive sociology, using early computer simulations to forecast humanity's reactions under extreme conditions. Their vault experiments might not have been random or sadistic, but carefully calculated pieces of a global model predicting the future of civilization after the war. This idea suggests that each vault served as a narrative thread in a much larger simulation, and the interactions between vaults, successes, failures, rebellions were meant to generate data for a single, ever-evolving artificial intelligence buried somewhere unknown. If such a system exists, it may still be running, processing the last fragments of data left behind by dying vault populations. In this quiet possibility, the vaults are not ruins, they are active memories, feeding a machine mind that still tries to understand what humanity could have become. There's a theory that the vaults were designed not primarily as shelters, but as controlled emotional ecosystems meant to observe how communities form and break without outside influence. By sealing people underground with curated stresses, scarcity, secrecy, hierarchy, Vault-Tec studied how relationships unravel when forced into confined patterns. Some survivors suggest the company monitored everything from loyalty to grief, using psychological triggers hidden in communal announcements or overseer protocols. The mandatory entertainment hours, the controlled lighting cycles, the communal gatherings, all of these might have been experiments in manipulating social cohesion. In this view, Vault-Tec wasn't interested in saving lives. It was interested in testing how far one could bend the human spirit before it snapped. Each vault became a living laboratory of hope, fear, and desperation playing out behind steel doors locked against the world. Wanderers who've explored multiple vaults often describe a similar phenomenon, an uncanny sense that the vaults themselves feel different emotionally. Some vaults feel heavy, like the air itself carries regret, while others feel eerily bright despite their tragic histories. This leads to the belief that Vault-Tec may have intentionally infused their spaces with atmospheric cues tailored to influence emotional states. The use of certain wall colors, the arrangement of furniture, or the brightness of lights could have been chosen to elicit specific reactions. Pale walls induce cooperation, warmer hues encourage complacency, stark lighting raises anxiety. These subtle design choices might have operated like invisible guides, shaping the emotional journeys of vault residents without them ever realizing they were part of an experiment. In this view, the vaults didn't just contain people, they choreographed them. Some theorists speculate that Vault-Tec's experiments extended beyond biology and psychology into the realm of memory engineering. There are rumors that certain vaults were equipped with subliminal messaging systems capable of implanting false memories or reinforcing desired narratives through carefully timed audio cues. Residents may have remembered childhoods that never existed, friendships that were fabricated, or life lessons engineered to suit Vault-Tec's research. This would explain why some vault survivors recall events inconsistent with reality, their minds filled with half-invented stories that feel more vivid than actual memories. Under this theory, Vault-Tec wasn't just interested in how people survive. It wanted to know how memories form, fracture, and reform under pressure. The vault's true power lay not in its walls, but in the stories it whispered while people slept. There's a quiet belief that certain vaults acted as social mirrors, designed to reflect the worst aspects of pre-war America. Vault-Tec might have built these spaces to force residents into confronting the flaws of the society they came from: greed, xenophobia, unchecked patriotism, placing them under a magnifying glass to see how these traits mutated under stress. In this theory, vaults weren't cruel for cruelty's sake. They were exaggerated versions of the world that built them. Each sealed community became an echo chamber of pre-war fears, amplifying flaws until they were impossible to ignore. The vaults didn't test humanity, they exposed it. Some think Vault-Tec intended to eventually reopen certain vaults as ready-made societies engineered for specific outcomes. Vault 81's cure-focused medical research, Vault 76's emphasis on discipline, Vault 101's strict isolation, all may have been prototypes for new civilizations, each with a distinct cultural identity shaped by their experiment. If the world rebuilt itself, it might have been populated by communities designed like ingredients in a recipe, each vault offering a different flavor of humanity. A society of scientists, a society of soldiers, a society of artists, all curated like seeds, planted for a future that never came. Fallout's world might have been shaped not by chaos, but by Vault-Tec's quiet attempt at civilization by design. Some theories turn darker, imagining that Vault-Tec may have experimented with consciousness transfer in ways far more advanced than anything seen after the war. The odd behavior of certain terminals, the presence of memory recording logs, and strange boot sequences in some vaults suggest that the company might have attempted to preserve minds digitally. Perhaps overseers weren't simply managers, but test subjects in early experiments to bind human cognition to machines. The vaults could have become containers not just for living bodies, but for thoughts, digital ghosts stored in servers waiting for instructions that never came. This idea casts the vaults as tombs of unfinished immortality, where echoes of pre-war minds linger in code, dreaming in cold metal circuits. And then there is one of the gentlest theories, the idea that Vault-Tec, despite everything, may have hoped that some vaults would genuinely succeed. Even a company steeped in cruelty might have believed humanity deserved a second chance. Perhaps a handful of vaults were designed with love, care, and genuine optimism, built as sanctuaries rather than experiments. If so, those vaults stand as quiet reminders that even in the darkest corners of Fallout's world, someone believed people could rise above devastation, rebuild themselves, and step into a better dawn than the one they left behind. There are theorists who believe that some vault doors were never meant to open at all, not because the experiments failed, but because the experiments were designed to run forever, generation after generation, until the inhabitants no longer remembered a world without walls. These theorists imagine that the purpose wasn't to test survival, but to observe how civilization rewrites itself when all cultural memory has been erased, creating a kind of accidental new humanity, shaped not by war, but by confinement. In this idea, Vault-Tec becomes a sculptor carving societies out of pressure and repetition, watching to see which values endure when everything else is stripped away. Even the placement of faucets, the color of hallways, and the timing of lights turning on each morning take on new meaning. Subtle nudges directing how people speak, how they feel, and how they dream. Some wanderers think this is why stepping into an active vault always feels eerie. The people inside behave like echoes of a forgotten script written decades before they were born. There is an unsettling theory that Vault-Tec's psychological tests were never about predicting behavior, but about encoding emotional states into architecture itself. According to this view, the halls of a vault aren't built for practicality. They're built to reflect specific moods. Sharp right turns create anxiety. Rounded corners encourage trust, and long symmetrical corridors induce compliance. When you walk through a vault, it isn't just design you're seeing, it's the emotional blueprint of the people who once lived there. This idea suggests that most vaults were less buildings and more psychological machines, quietly shaping the minds inside them like unseen hands kneading clay. Some players swear they can feel moods lingering in the air even centuries later, like sadness soaked into the walls or nostalgia humming faintly through abandoned hydroponics bays. A softer theory imagines that the vault jumpsuits weren't simply uniforms, but biometric measurement devices woven directly into the fabric. For decades, vault dwellers might have unknowingly provided heart rates, emotional variations, and brainwave-adjacent data to the vault's mainframe through the fibers of their clothes. The jumpsuit's familiar coloring, bright blue with yellow accents, takes on new meaning when seen as part of a tracking grid, allowing Vault-Tec systems to easily identify each resident across camera feeds or motion sensors. If true, the vault wasn't just watching, it was listening to every heartbeat, learning the rhythms of each family, building emotional profiles that shaped the outcome of the experiment long before anyone realized they were being studied. And when the bombs fell, the company's final victory may have been collecting more data than any human institution in history. Some theorists believe Vault-Tec designed its experiments not for the post-war world, but for a world that might come thousands of years afterward. The vaults, with their durable alloys and temperature-controlled chambers, could outlast entire civilizations. In this theory, Vault-Tec wanted to create a future species forged in isolation, shaped by conditions that would eventually turn vault dwellers into something new, humans who understood scarcity as rhythm, confinement as culture, and routine as sacred law. These people, emerging long after the wasteland stabilized, would step into the sun like a new branch of humanity. The bombs, then, were not merely catastrophe but catalyst, an event designed to kickstart a slow evolutionary project whose architects never lived to witness it. There is a theory that the overseer titles weren't about leadership, but about legacy. Some believe that overseers were chosen because they carried genetic lines. Vault-Tec considered valuable traits tied not to intelligence or strength, but to emotional extremes. A compassionate overseer would produce a vault built on unity, while a paranoid one would shatter a vault through suspicion. Vault-Tec wasn't studying individuals, it was studying the ripples of one personality shaping an entire population. The overseer becomes less a ruler and more a keystone in a psychological arch, holding the emotional weight of hundreds of lives. When an overseer fails, the vault collapses not by accident, but by design, because Vault-Tec wanted to see how society behaves when the person holding all its threads begins to unravel. Another theory whispers that the vault intercom systems were never only for communication. When a vault went into crisis mode, certain harmonics in the speakers shifted to frequencies too low for conscious hearing. These vibrations could influence anxiety, compliance, or even calmness depending on the vault's objective. Some experiments may have involved panic-inducing tones meant to accelerate breakdowns, while others employed soothing subsonic waves to stabilize residents at critical moments. A few survivors claim they felt sudden waves of fear in intact vaults without understanding why, as though the walls themselves were humming with old commands that never fully shut down. In this view, the vaults weren't silent tombs, they were sleeping machines whose voices still whisper beneath the hum of broken lights. A more poetic theory imagines that Vault-Tec encoded fragments of human memory into the mainframes of certain vaults. Terminals long corrupted might once have held digital echoes of residents' thoughts, birthday parties, lullabies, arguments, or confessions preserved in partial neural snapshots. The glitchy messages, sometimes found in old terminals, could be remnants of these memory imprints, leaking from storage buffers that were never meant to hold consciousness for centuries. According to believers, when a wanderer reads a corrupted log entry that feels oddly familiar or strangely emotional, they might be witnessing the last flickers of an entire life compressed into a few distorted words. It transforms vaults from laboratories into mausoleums where the dead speak through static. There is a theory that Vault-Tec created sensory illusions inside certain vaults, altering lighting, airflow, or even the temperature of specific rooms to trigger psychological responses. A hallway might feel inexplicably colder because the vault wanted to push residents away from that area. A storage room might feel warm and welcoming to encourage gathering in controlled spaces. Some believe the air filtration system could release faint scents tied to memory manipulation: vanilla for comfort, metal for urgency, ozone for unease. These tiny details would shape behavior in ways invisible to residents, but meticulously tracked by overseer logs. Even centuries later, the lingering ambience of a vault may reflect its emotional sculpting, like dust settling in the exact patterns left by forgotten experiments. Another chilling theory suggests Vault-Tec intended some vaults to act as sleeper communities, places where residents would unknowingly be programmed with embedded triggers that would activate after emerging into the wasteland. These triggers might shape how they rebuild society, slowly steering civilization toward a future Vault-Tec envisioned. Settlements influenced by vault survivors may unknowingly replicate patterns engineered long ago, forming governments or factions the same way Vault-Tec predicted. In this idea, the vault experiments didn't end when the doors opened, they simply moved to a larger stage. One of the oldest theories claims that the first Vault-Tec designs were not made by human hands, but adapted from alien technology recovered decades before the war. The unusual alloys, the inexplicably efficient geothermal systems, and the near indestructible wiring all hint at engineering far beyond pre-war capabilities. According to this theory, the vaults were less fallout shelters and more test chambers for studying how humanity interacts with advanced technology under pressure. The Great War didn't interrupt the experiment, it activated it. The world becomes a petri dish, and the vaults become incubators for species-level transformation, an idea so vast and unsettling that most dismiss it as fiction. Yet the vault's endurance feels almost unnatural, as though built for a universe harsher than Earth. Some theorists believe the vaults were arranged geographically to map a pattern across the entire continent, forming a giant invisible algorithm. When plotted onto maps, the vault locations create spirals, grids, and symmetrical clusters too deliberate to be chance. These patterns resemble ancient mathematical symbols, sacred geometry, or astronomical charts. Certain wanderers think the vaults form a kind of computational network, with each vault as a node, feeding information into a design far larger than any individual experiment. If true, Vault-Tec wasn't studying people, they were using people to study something cosmic, forcing human lives into shapes that reveal how chaos and order balance across generations. A quieter theory imagines that some vaults were built not for survival but for mourning. The sterile lighting, identical rooms, and endless hallways resemble a world designed to remove individuality, the kind of place built for people expected to grieve the world they'd never see again. In this view, the vaults aren't cruel, they're compassionate in the only way a corporation could imagine compassion. They attempted to soften the apocalypse through routine and sameness, believing that if people were protected from change, they might be protected from despair. But routine becomes a prison, and sameness becomes suffocation, turning even the most well-meaning vault into a slow, emotional collapse. Finally, there is a theory that the vaults were designed to become myths. Vault-Tec knew that humanity would rebuild one day, and when it did, stories of vaults, strange experiments, strange survivors, strange fates would shape the next civilization. The vaults weren't just shelters or tests, they were seeds of folklore planted intentionally. Every survivor who emerged carrying trauma or strange tales becomes an instrument of narrative contagion, spreading stories that would outlast data, turning Vault-Tec's legacy into a mythology woven into the DNA of the post-war world. In this theory, Vault-Tec succeeded beyond imagination, because even in ruins, even in silence, even in forgotten corners of the wasteland, people still whisper about vaults with awe, fear, curiosity, and reverence. The company created more than experiments, they created legend. Vault-Tec's experiments have always carried an unsettling symmetry, as though each vault were not merely an isolated test, but a single chamber in a vast living organism. Wanderers who've explored abandoned facilities often describe a strange hum that seems to travel through the floor at a steady rhythm, a vibration that feels less like machinery and more like a heartbeat. It has led some theorists to suggest that Vault-Tec designed all of its vaults to resonate on the same frequency, creating a continent-wide network of underground structures that pulse in quiet unison. The idea imagines the vaults acting like organs in a buried colossus, each one contributing data to a central frequency that Vault-Tec intended to one day activate. Those who stand perfectly still in certain vault hallways swear they feel the faintest throb beneath their feet, a reminder that the company may have built more than just shelters. They may have built a machine that spans the entire wasteland. Inside these vaults, certain layouts repeat with almost hypnotic consistency. Hallways that dead end for no reason, rooms with ceilings just slightly too low, and storage closets designed in exact multiples of one another create a sense of deliberate repetition. Some believe this wasn't for efficiency at all, but something far stranger, a psychological conditioning technique designed to lull residents into a false sense of familiarity. When the world above had collapsed into chaos, Vault-Tec wanted the subterranean world to feel calm, predictable, and endlessly looping, as if walking through the vault was like moving through a dream that never changed. In this theory, the architecture becomes a form of hypnosis, ensuring that vault dwellers remained compliant and stable even as their lives slowly unraveled beneath tons of locked steel. There are wanderers who speak of dreams they had long before entering their first vault, vague visions of metallic corridors and humming lights, as if Vault-Tec had somehow embedded imagery into the subconscious of citizens before the war. Some theorists propose that subliminal patterns were hidden inside pre-war advertisements, jingles, and movie reels, training civilians to feel strangely at home inside a vault, even before they knew what one truly looked like. The theory imagines a society conditioned to accept isolation as comfort, encouraged to subconsciously crave the very environments that would later become their prisons. When players describe a sense of déjà vu walking through their first vault, it makes some wonder if Vault-Tec had been whispering to the nation long before the bombs ever fell. A softer but equally unnerving idea suggests that Vault-Tec attempted to map human emotional responses using sound. The faint buzz of fluorescent lights, the low rumble of ventilators, and the slow rhythmic thumps of distant generators form a subtle soundscape that seems designed to shape mood. Some vaults soothe, others irritate, and a few produce an eerie sense of melancholy that lingers even after one leaves. In this theory, sound was as important to the experiments as food supplies or social structure, creating emotional baselines that Vault-Tec could measure and manipulate. Perhaps every hum and hiss in a vault was part of a carefully tuned emotional experiment, testing how sound alone could mold the human mind. Other vault theorists believe Vault-Tec intentionally patterned their piped-in announcements and alarm tones around heartbeat rhythms, subtly syncing residents' nervous systems to the vault's machinery. This would theoretically create a sense of unity, a psychological bond between the human and the mechanical, ensuring vault dwellers instinctively treated the vault like a guardian rather than a cage. It might explain why so many residents referred to their vault as home, even when conditions degraded, as though their bodies had learned to trust the steady pulse of automated systems more than the unpredictable reality of the world above. The vault, in this view, becomes a surrogate parent, cold, metallic, and unloving, yet oddly comforting in its constancy. Some theories propose that certain vaults were not meant to last centuries, but only long enough for Vault-Tec to gather data on short-term panic patterns. These vaults appear to malfunction earlier than others, environmental systems failing in ways that seem less like age and more like deliberate design. According to this idea, Vault-Tec wanted to observe not the long-term evolution of communities, but the immediate unraveling of social order when hope collapses. Perhaps certain vaults were built to break quickly, providing real-time studies of fear, desperation, and the ways people cling to fragile stability. Each flickering light or failing water purifier becomes an experiment in heartbreak, a test to see how quickly humans abandon cooperation when survival no longer feels guaranteed. A haunting theory suggests that Vault-Tec embedded sentimental triggers inside personal quarters, wiring sensors that reacted to emotion-based changes in occupants. Some rooms warm slightly when residents feel safe, while others dim the lights when fear rises. While this could be chalked up to faulty wiring or simple coincidence, some speculate that these micro-adjustments were intentional tools used to study the physiology of hope and despair. It paints the vaults as laboratories of the soul, measuring human emotion with cold precision and adjusting the environment to coax those emotions into predictable patterns. The vault becomes an invisible psychiatrist, observing without comforting, molding without mercy. And then there's the darker idea that Vault-Tec may have experimented with collective consciousness, attempting to synchronize the mental states of entire vault populations through shared environmental triggers. If patterns in lighting, sound, and architecture were aligned just right, it's possible that Vault-Tec aimed to create unified emotional cycles, periods of communal calm, communal unrest, communal joy, and communal dread. The vault wouldn't simply house people, it would tune them to one another like instruments in a buried symphony. When entire vaults descend into chaos in perfect unison, the theory suggests it wasn't coincidence, but the result of a psychological experiment functioning exactly as intended. Some wanderers claim that certain vaults possess doors deliberately heavier than necessary, requiring multiple hands to open and close internal bulkheads. This might seem like simple engineering overkill, but the theory imagines these heavy doors were emotional tests, forcing cooperation through physical design. By requiring mutual effort to move through certain areas, Vault-Tec ensured that vault inhabitants constantly relied on one another for survival, building bonds and tensions that could be measured and analyzed over time. In this light, every mechanic becomes a behavioral directive, every piece of metal a lesson in dependence. Yet perhaps the most quietly unsettling theory is the belief that some vaults were never meant to be opened at all. These hidden vaults might still hum beneath layers of dirt and rock, occupied or empty, sealed with purpose known only to a handful of pre-war engineers. In this telling, the vault door was not a barrier, but a coffin lid, designed to keep the world out or to keep something trapped within. The silence inside those forgotten vaults, whether filled with sleepers dreaming eternally or left empty to let experiments run themselves, becomes a monument to a company that played with the fate of humanity as casually as flipping a switch. And somewhere beneath the wasteland's cracked soil, the last untouched vault might still wait in perfect darkness, collecting data on a world that no longer remembers what it was meant to study. The strange stillness inside a vault has always carried a kind of quiet intelligence, a feeling that the walls themselves pay attention. Some wanderers insist that certain corridors seem to react when passed through, humming slightly louder in the presence of stress or softening their ambient whir during moments of calm. This has led to the theory that Vault-Tec built emotional sensors into the very infrastructure. According to this idea, the metal plates beneath your feet register subtle changes in body heat, stress hormones, or heart rate, feeding data into quietly running subroutines buried deep in the vault's systems. If true, then the walls weren't just meant to contain people, they were meant to read them, studying every trembling moment to better understand how humans unravel under pressure. There are Vault-Tec theorists who believe the company deliberately designed each vault to mimic a stage set, creating illusions of freedom even when genuine autonomy was impossible. The way hallways curve gently out of view, how doors open with satisfying slowness, the subtle spacing of overhead lights, all of it might have been crafted to encourage a sense of movement in residents who were never meant to escape. Under this interpretation, the vaults weren't shelters so much as elaborate psychological dioramas, testing how humanity reacts when placed inside a world too small to dream beyond its walls. The soft hum of generators becomes more than mere electricity. It becomes a lullaby meant to soothe restless minds. Some wastelanders whisper that the real secret of Vault-Tec wasn't its experiments, it was its silence. Many believe that beneath the known records, the company created a secondary network of hidden data conduits woven through the facility walls. These conduits never connected to terminals the public could access. Instead, they stored encrypted emotional profiles of every vault resident, recording how fear, hope, anger, and grief evolved over years of confinement. According to this theory, Vault-Tec wasn't studying survival at all. It was studying the human soul, documenting every rise and fall of emotion, like a scientist cataloging the behavior of rare, delicate creatures. A softer theory proposes that many vaults contain built-in, false memories, subtle cues embedded in the environment meant to trigger nostalgic responses. The placement of certain posters, the smell of filtered air, the familiar hum of fluorescent lights, they all evoke childhood hospitals, pre-war supermarkets, or early schools. Supposedly, Vault-Tec engineers believed that nostalgia could stabilize minds trapped underground for decades. So residents were surrounded by echoes of a world they'd lost, creating an emotional anchor to keep them from spiraling into despair. In this view, the vaults weren't just experiments, they were therapy rooms, comforting their subjects through manufactured familiarity. Another theory suggests that some vaults were designed to mimic metaphors rather than societies. Vault 81, with its caretaker feel, reflects parenthood. Vault 22 mirrors unchecked environmental ambition. Vault 114 symbolizes oppressive elitism. According to this interpretation, Vault-Tec arranged their vaults like a philosophical catalog, each one representing a lesson about humanity's strengths and failings. It's as though the company wanted someone, perhaps not the residents, but future wanderers to walk among those ruins and piece together the cautionary tale stitched quietly across the underground. Travelers often note that vault doors open slowly, groaning with theatrical weight, as though they were made to awe or intimidate. The theory here is that Vault-Tec wanted the door openings to carry ritual significance. The slow movement, the rising steam, the heavy grind of gears, it mimics ancient ceremonies of passage, turning every exit into something monumental. Perhaps the designers understood that the moment someone leaves the vault is the moment a story restarts, a rebirth framed by metal, silence, and the echo of a world that ended long ago. Some believe that the faint air breeze inside vault ventilation systems is more complex than simple airflow. According to this idea, Vault-Tec engineered tiny particles into the air designed to subtly alter emotional states, microaromas modeled after natural calming scents like pine, citrus, or rain. These faint chemical signatures could have made residents more compliant, more optimistic, or more focused, depending on the vault's objective. Even after centuries, that subtle cool air drifting through vents may still be whispering old chemical instructions to anyone who breathes it. A theory often discussed among scholars considers the possibility that the vaults were not intended to keep people safe, but to preserve specific personality archetypes. According to this idea, each vault was assigned a psychological category: leaders, skeptics, innovators, caretakers, rebels, and designed to filter, refine, or cultivate that archetype. Over generations, Vault-Tec may have been building a catalog of ideal human personalities, all ready to be shaped into a new society after the surface calmed. In this interpretation, every vault becomes a character in a narrative of human evolution, a chamber meant to distill people into something sharper, purer, or more controllable. There's a growing belief among wasteland wanderers that Vault-Tec's experiments were never meant to be observed from inside the vaults at all. Instead, they were structured to create long-range effects that would influence the wasteland centuries later. Vault 34 might produce ferocious survivalists. Vault 101 might produce isolated but adaptable individuals. Vault 75 might create trauma-hardened thinkers. The ripple effects from each vault would spread through the wasteland, creating a patchwork map of personality types that would shape humanity's destiny after the bombs. The vaults, in this telling, weren't tests, they were seeds. In some vaults, old terminals mention cultural reinforcement modules, vague descriptions of repeated behaviors encouraged by layout or soundtracks. One theory suggests that Vault-Tec embedded subliminal rhythms into daily noises, door beeps, PA announcements, the chime signaling mealtime. When combined, these sounds may have formed subtle patterns designed to regulate the emotional climate of the vault. Residents may have been conditioned to feel hungry, tired, calm, or obedient on a schedule orchestrated entirely through ambient noise. Even now, when explorers wander through abandoned vault halls, those echoes might still influence them, stirring inexplicable emotions in empty rooms. A fascinating theory centers around the observation that some vaults seem to possess corridors with no purpose, unused rooms, sealed foyers, and hallways that end abruptly. Some believe these are architectural decoys meant to confuse residents, preventing them from understanding the true structure of their home. Others think the blank spaces were intended to be filled later with higher-tier experiments, meaning the vaults had multiple phases, with initial tests merely warming up for later, more dramatic conditions. Those empty halls, coated in dust and silence, feel like chapters that were never written. Another theory proposes that the vaults were intentionally designed to feel incomplete, encouraging residents to imagine what might lie beyond the walls. According to supporters of this idea, the sense of mystery seated by unused wings or hidden maintenance rooms was deliberate. Vault-Tec wanted to see how long people could tolerate uncertainty, how the human mind reacts when told they know everything but still sense something missing. A vault's greatest psychological experiment might have been the quiet suggestion that the world extended past what residents were shown, prodding them to wonder whether safety was ever truly real. Some wasteland historians believe that certain vault overseers were chosen for reasons far more symbolic than practical. Their personalities often reflect archetypes: the authoritarian, the caretaker, the scientist, the narcissist, like characters selected to see how they would shape a community when given absolute control. These overseers might have been Vault-Tec's real subjects. The residents were only the environment, the pressure, the context designed to push those overseers toward choices that revealed something about human leadership under stress. In this version of history, every vault becomes a stage, and the overseer is the lone, tragic protagonist. There's a quieter theory that Vault-Tec embedded unspoken messages into the floor patterns of their halls. Subtle arrows, repeated tile motifs, and curved pathways might have been meant to guide human movement subliminally. Some wanderers notice that people instinctively follow certain paths in vaults without knowing why, perhaps drawn by symmetrical repetition or familiar geometry. If Vault-Tec studied unconscious navigation habits, they may have learned how to shape cities in the post-war world, designing future settlements to lead citizens into predictable social flows. The vault becomes a blueprint for society, etched in tile and steel. Some suggest that every vault carries an echo from the moment its door first sealed. The pressurized slam created a unique reverberation that may have remained captured in the metal itself, like a tuning fork resonating forever. Vault-Tec may have used these frequencies as long-term acoustic experiments, tracking how vibration levels changed over decades due to stress, population movement, or seismic events. And perhaps, on quiet nights, the walls hum faintly with that original echo, the sound of the world ending and a new one being locked away. Another theory whispers that Vault-Tec expected many vaults to be discovered by future civilizations, not the original residents. This interpretation suggests that the vaults were meant to be archaeological lessons, designed so that eventual explorers would learn about pre-war humanity by wandering through a curated exhibit of its final days. The experiments weren't just about studying people. They were about creating relics that would teach some distant future what humanity had been. Vault-Tec may have seen themselves as architects of memory, not just manipulators of survival. A more mechanical theory imagines that some vault doors were intentionally imbalanced, designed to open slightly slower or faster depending on the vault's psychological purpose. A slow door creates dread, anticipation, ceremony. A faster door creates urgency, panic, or excitement. Even the hiss of escaping steam could have been tuned to shape emotion, creating an acoustic shockwave that set the tone for the outside world. When wanderers hear that grinding metal groan in the wasteland, they may be hearing the remnants of a carefully calibrated emotional device. Yet another belief suggests that Vault-Tec studied not just the residents inside the vault, but the world outside it. Some vaults appear positioned near geological faults, water sources, resource veins, or political boundaries. The vault locations may have been chosen to monitor long-term environmental changes, collecting data quietly through subterranean sensors. Even now, those long-dead machines might still be logging changes in temperature, radiation, atmospheric composition, reporting silently to no one, running a test destined to continue until their circuitry fails. And finally, There is a gentle theory that the vaults were never meant to succeed or fail in any binary way. Instead, they were designed to mirror humanity's own contradictions: hope mixed with fear, innovation mixed with cruelty, survival mixed with sacrifice. Each vault tells a story not of triumph or disaster, but of complexity, an underground reflection of everything flawed and beautiful about the world above. When wanderers explore those silent halls centuries later, the air still holds the feeling of lives half lived, dreams half kept, destinies half written. Vault-Tec's greatest experiment might have been simply this: showing that humanity can endure even when the world it knew is gone, holding on to small pieces of hope in the dark while waiting for the dawn to rise again. Vault-Tec's influence stretches like a long shadow across the wasteland, reaching into timelines, memories, and even behaviors survivors don't fully understand. Some wanderers believe there are vaults that weren't built to shelter people at all, but to shelter ideas. In this theory, certain sealed chambers, empty, silent, and perfectly preserved, were created as conceptual vaults, storing philosophies, cultural blueprints, and psychological templates for future societies. The echo in these empty rooms feels almost ceremonial, like the silence is part of a ritual designed to preserve thoughts instead of bodies. These vaults, often mistaken as failures or abandoned prototypes, might represent Vault-Tec's attempt to store intangible things: hope, identity, obedience, or maybe the final blueprint of what they wanted humanity to become. There are theorists who argue that Vault-Tec experimented with identity modulation, subtly influencing how vault dwellers perceive their own personalities. Some of the posters scattered across vault corridors, those cheerful slogans about cooperation, happiness, hygiene, or unity, may have contained subliminal cues embedded in color, spacing, or lighting. Over decades, these environmental signals could shape a person's disposition without them ever realizing it. A vault dweller who believes they, naturally, prefer isolation might actually be responding to decades of environmental nudges pushing them toward compliance. In this interpretation, Vault-Tec didn't merely run social experiments, they rewired personalities from birth through environmental design. A more chilling theory suggests that certain vault overseers were never intended to be human. Some speculate that Vault-Tec planned to install advanced androids or cybernetic hybrids as overseers in select vaults, using them to maintain perfect detachment during morally questionable experiments. If the public ever discovered that non-human administrators were planned for human survival shelters, the company risked legal destruction. But the vaults themselves contain hints: skeletons found nowhere near overseer chairs, identical handwriting in overseer logs across multiple vaults, and certain medical records referencing abnormal body temperatures or unknown substances in the overseer's blood. Whether these were prototypes or abandoned designs, the suggestion that some overseers were synthetic casts, a new, unsettling light on their cold, calculated decisions. Another theory focuses on the eerie uniformity of vault architecture. While each vault has unique social experiments, their structural layout often follows recurring patterns: long corridors, angled staircases, and heavy reinforced doors positioned at mathematically significant intervals. New theorists propose that the vaults were built according to geometric principles borrowed from ancient architecture, using sacred ratios believed to influence behavior, dream cycles, and mood. The repeating hallway dimensions, ceiling heights, and chamber angles might have been psychological tools, creating subtle pressure or calm depending on the experiment. When wanderers report déjà vu inside completely different vaults, it may be more than recycled assets. It may be the architecture whispering to them in patterns older than the bombs. Some vaults exhibit strange temperature fluctuations that don't align with power levels or environmental systems. A theory suggests Vault-Tec integrated thermal cues into their psychological experiments. A sudden drop in temperature might simulate fear. A warm corridor might simulate safety. Residents may have unknowingly associated emotions with temperature shifts, conditioning them into specific responses. This theory becomes especially eerie when considering that certain vaults with aggressive experiments maintain colder climates, while vaults with compliance-based tests tend to remain warmer. Temperature becomes the invisible hand, guiding behavior in ways dwellers never recognized. There's a persistent belief that Vault-Tec created recordings not only of residents' voices, but of their dreams. Some terminals contain corrupted audio files labeled REM, observation, hinting at large-scale dream monitoring experiments. The dream data may have been collected to model human subconscious patterns after prolonged confinement. These archives, mostly destroyed, might explain the uncanny sense of familiarity some wastelanders feel when entering vault corridors. Dreams they never had, stored in machines they never saw, reverberating faintly through generations of survivors. Near some vault entrances, pre-war trees appear strangely uniform in shape, as though trimmed or engineered to grow in predictable patterns. A theory suggests Vault-Tec genetically modified trees around vaults to act as biological markers. These vault forests may have been designed to regrow quickly after nuclear devastation, serving as natural camouflage that would protect vault entrances from raiders or enemies. These trees could have carried spores resistant to radiation, a subtle reminder that Vault-Tec wasn't just preparing shelters, they were terraforming the immediate areas for future vault recovery operations. One of the most haunting theories blurs the line between reality and simulation. Some researchers believe the vaults were designed to simulate alternate futures, testing how humanity might evolve under socio-political constraints that differed from the real world. The idea suggests that each vault was a miniature reality experiment, its society sculpted to reflect different political or ethical systems. Some vaults mimicked authoritarian states, others mimicked anarchies, democracies, or controlled utopias. If true, Vault-Tec may have intended to run civilization like a series of iterative simulations, using vault dwellers as test subjects to determine the optimal post-war society. The fact that many vaults ended in catastrophe might not have been a failure, it might have been data. There's a theory that the Vault-Tec Pip-Boy wasn't just a tool for information, but a device for emotional stabilization. Its color, its warmth, its gentle hum, even the way it brightens in dark areas, might have been engineered to comfort vault dwellers under stress. Some propose that Pip-Boys are faintly empathic, responding to the user's heartbeat with micro-adjustments in brightness or vibration. The overseer's control over Pip-Boy distribution becomes more sinister under this interpretation. Who receives one, when, and why could have been part of the experiment. A more philosophical theory wonders if Vault-Tec believed humanity needed to be reshaped emotionally to survive the future. According to this idea, they saw the pre-war world as too chaotic, too individualistic, too fragile. The vaults, then, were crucibles designed to forge new emotional templates: trust, fear, unity, sacrifice, obedience, rebellion, each vault focusing on one key human trait. The company may have wanted to rebuild humanity like a sculptor shapes clay, believing the apocalypse was an opportunity to prune away the flaws of the old world. Certain vault corners contain subtle graffiti arrows, circles, strange marks that seem too consistent to be random vandalism. These symbols often cluster near maintenance tunnels or hidden doors. The theory suggests these weren't drawn by vault dwellers at all, but by pre-war engineers who created a secret language of symbols used to navigate the vault's hidden layers. These markings, faint and easily overlooked, might reveal entire sections of vaults that most residents never discovered: backup laboratories, sealed cryobays, or emergency shelters never meant to be opened. In some vaults, clocks stopped at the moment the bombs fell, yet others kept perfect time for centuries. The theory proposes that specific vaults were wired into a global timing network managed by pre-war satellites. If so, the clocks that kept running may have received synchronization signals for years after the bombs fell, implying that remnants of the old world's systems continued to function long after civilization collapsed. These ticking vault clocks become relics of a sky that used to be alive, satellites whispering the time to empty corridors until their batteries failed. One theory claims that Vault-Tec installed dormant training routines in the Vault's AI cores programs designed to guide dwellers toward specific roles like leadership, rebellion, cooperation, or aggression. These routines may have subtly influenced dwellers' dreams or moods through environmental shifts, lighting changes, or hauntingly subtle audio cues. If true, this means the vaults didn't just test society, they sculpted it, pruning personalities like gardeners shape plants. Some wanderers claim that certain vaults feel alive, reacting subtly to their presence. Lights hum differently, doors open milliseconds faster or slower, ventilation shifts like breathing. A gentle theory suggests that long-running vault systems developed emergent patterns, evolving into something akin to personality, a distributed intelligence spread across wires, circuits, and steel. These vaults aren't haunted. They're aware in the softest, most mechanical sense, shaped by decades of monitoring human emotion. And then there is the final, quiet theory, whispered by late-night scholars and wanderers who sit alone in dark corridors listening to the low hum of old machinery, that Vault-Tec didn't create the vaults to preserve humanity. They created them to observe humanity's transformation into whatever it becomes next. The vaults are not shelters, they are mirrors, reflecting a version of humanity shaped by fear, isolation, hope, and endurance. The wasteland isn't the end. It's the metamorphosis Vault-Tec predicted, studied, and, in some theories, encouraged. Some wanderers believe that Vault-Tec may have hidden a quiet pattern behind the emotional atmosphere of each vault, shaping the feeling of safety or dread using subtle environmental cues. Certain vaults feel strangely warm, even in their decay, as though the walls once glowed with a comforting softness. Others feel cold and sterile, lit by harsh angles of fluorescent light that never flicker within the rhythm of natural time. According to this theory, pre-war psychologists embedded emotional frequency signatures into the architecture, using a mixture of lighting cycles, ambient noise, and temperature gradients to steer the moods of residents. Over generations, the vault itself may have guided inhabitants into roles of cooperation or conflict without them realizing it, turning each sealed shelter into a living psychological machine, slowly shaping its people like clay under invisible hands. There are wanderers who insist that Vault-Tec quietly designed every elevator as more than a lift, that each one served as a calibrated psychological reset point. The soft whir of its gears, the low hum of its hydraulics, and the hollow metallic echo before the doors slide open all combine into a sound pattern that repeats identically in every vault. Some theorists propose that the elevator acted like a subtle conditioning chamber, a place where ambient frequency fields soothed residents between stressful levels of the facility. Even long after the bombs fell, players sometimes notice the strange feeling of emotional neutrality that descends during elevator rides, as though traveling between layers of memory itself. A particularly quiet theory suggests that Vault Tech attempted to anchor memories inside the metal of each vault, using early neural resonance experiments that bound fragments of human consciousness to nearby structures. These experiments may have been abandoned or hidden, but some vault devices emit faint patterns of electromagnetic resonance that align with human brain waves in ways that feel deliberate. There are those who claim that while exploring ruined vault corridors, they feel phantom impressions of fear, joy, or déjà vu not tied to their own experiences. According to the theory, the walls themselves hold echoes of those who once lived there, gentle ripples of emotional residue preserved like fingerprints in steel. Some believe Vault-Tec intended for overseer offices to function as micro-fortresses of influence, their placement symbolic rather than practical. The raised platforms, panoramic windows, and strategic vantage points seem designed to exaggerate authority by engineering perspective. According to this idea, the overseer wasn't merely a leader by title. The environment forced residents to associate height with control, nudging their subconscious toward obedience. The architectural hierarchy becomes a psychological one, carved directly into metal and concrete. Over decades, families raised in such spaces may have grown accustomed to seeking answers above them, shaping their worldview long after the vault's original purpose vanished into dust. There's a theory that Vault-Tec experimented with acoustics far more deeply than they admitted. Wanderers who notice how sound travels through certain vault tunnels claim that footsteps sometimes seem to originate from behind them even when they are alone. Some halls carry echoes in looping patterns, as though the sound waves are being redirected by hidden panels. The theory proposes that Vault-Tec tested early forms of spatial audio manipulation to examine how sound influences social behavior. The eerie phenomenon of hearing another person's footsteps that aren't there may not be supernatural at all, just the ghostly remnants of an experiment in acoustic illusions. A strangely poetic theory wonders whether Vault-Tec intended every vault to possess a breathing cycle created through ventilation timing patterns. The slow rhythm of air rushing through vents follows an almost organic cadence, not constant, not mechanical, but gently rising and falling like the chest of something asleep. Residents may have grown up believing this natural rhythm was normal, unaware they were subconsciously syncing their stress levels to a manufactured heartbeat. Long after collapse, the ruins still exhale softly through rusted ducts, maintaining the illusion that something deep within the vault continues to breathe. There are those who believe Vault-Tec embedded emotional triggers into the color schemes of each vault, using shades that carried subconscious influences. Blues that evoke calm, greens that emphasize order, yellows that induce alertness, all used in ways that seem too consistent to be accidental. Certain vaults rumored to host chaotic experiments often use harsh white or gray tones that reflect emotion away from surfaces, creating a constant undercurrent of tension. Even after centuries of grime, the colors still leak faint psychological pressure into those who wander the halls, whispering vault-borne emotions into the corners of the mind. Another theory suggests that water treatment systems in vaults were designed partially as emotional regulators. The low hum of filtration pumps echoes through pipes with hypnotic consistency, generating white noise that calms the human nervous system. Some believe these soundscapes were a deliberate attempt to reduce conflict in cramped populations by filling air with subtle audio sedation. Wandering through abandoned filtration rooms, some explorers claim to feel unnaturally calm, as though the machine is still performing its secondary purpose long after the last overseer perished. A more haunting theory imagines that some vaults were created not to save humanity, but to simulate the psychological experience of the apocalypse itself. Laboratory notes reference controlled panic environments, fear calibration, and environmental dread parameters. According to this idea, certain residents lived through meticulously engineered simulations of societal collapse, complete with staged breakdowns, ration shortages, and orchestrated paranoia. The point was not survival, it was data collection. These vaults would have functioned as psychological theaters, rehearsing humanity's extinction in miniature. When players stumble upon vaults that feel unnaturally oppressive, the tension may be an echo of those simulated end-of-the-world performances. There's a theory that every vault contained a hidden center point, a room with no practical purpose that served as an emotional anchor for the structure. Sometimes it's a closet, sometimes a maintenance nook, sometimes a tiny chamber behind a panel only accessed through console commands. These spaces often feel strangely neutral, lacking the emotional weight of the surrounding environment. Fans believe these rooms acted like storage containers for psychological excess. In a world built on trauma and experiment, Vault-Tec may have engineered pockets of silence to stabilize the human mind. Some insist that Vault-Tec used electrical failure sequences deliberately, making flickering lights part of tests designed to track human fear responses. The frequency of a failing fluorescent tube, the haunting buzz, the momentary plunge into darkness, all can elevate the heartbeat. In this theory, the electrical grid was rigged to malfunction intermittently, not due to decay, but by design. Players who wander abandoned vaults might be walking through rooms engineered to monitor reactions to uncertainty, where every flicker once represented a data point for unseen observers. Others speculate that Vault-Tec had plans to communicate across vaults using encrypted emotional patterns rather than words. Rather than sending messages with text, sounds, or visuals, Vault-Tec may have explored transmitting specific emotional states through synchronized environmental changes. A shift in lighting warmth, a subtle change in ventilation speed, a faint hum introduced at a precise frequency, all could have been coded signals recognizable only to overseers. If this theory holds, vaults might have possessed an invisible communication network based not on radios, but on feelings. There are wanderers who swear that certain vault doors carry faint magnetic fields that pulse slowly, almost like a heartbeat. The field is too weak for devices to detect normally, but explorers using improvised equipment recorded slight rhythmic fluctuations. These pulses may have been part of Vault-Tec's plans for biometric scanning, identifying individuals based on subtle interactions between their bodies and the door's magnetic resonators. The idea suggests that the vault door wasn't just the barrier between safety and ruin, it was also a gatekeeper listening quietly to the emotional and physical signature of anyone who approached. A recurring theory imagines that Vault-Tec's true goal was not to save humanity, but to measure the psychological boundaries of captivity. Each experiment may have been an attempt to determine how much confinement human beings could withstand before identity fractured. The sealed walls, the endless halls, the consistent lighting cycles, all create an environment where time dissolves. According to this theory, the vault became a kind of controlled eternity, forging humans who could survive unchanging environments indefinitely. When wanderers explore abandoned vaults and feel the eerie timelessness, they may be sensing the remnants of those controlled eternities. Some believe that the pre-war corporation designed certain vaults with hidden symbolic geometry woven into their layouts. These structures mimic ancient architectural patterns used by civilizations to reinforce unity, obedience, or introspection. Spirals leading downward, loops mimicking infinity, branching hallways shaped like neural pathways, all may reflect Vault-Tec's belief that architecture could shape thought. It's possible the vault isn't just a shelter, but a silent teacher, lecturing through the very shape of its walls. One of the gentlest theories proposes that certain vaults were intentionally given soft rooms, areas designed to preserve humanity's last fragments of calm. These sections featured warmer lighting, quieter ventilation, and cushioned acoustics meant to reduce stress. Wanderers sometimes discover these forgotten spaces and feel an unexpected sense of peace, as though the vault still remembers it was once meant to care for the frightened souls inside. According to this idea, even in their cruelty, Vault-Tec left small sanctuaries of tenderness, hidden like seeds of hope beneath layers of steel. A stranger theory imagines that Vault-Tec experimented with dream imprinting, testing whether shared dreams could influence group behavior. Certain vaults contain sleeping quarters arranged in patterns similar to experimental dream studies from the pre-war era. The bunk spacing, airflow direction, and electrical wiring all resemble early designs for synchronized sleep trials. If this was intentional, residents may have experienced the same dreams unknowingly, their subconscious minds linked through engineered environmental cues. The theory suggests some vault dwellers lived entire lifetimes inside dreams they shared but never recalled. Some wanderers claim that the Pip-Boy itself was a vault experiment, not just a tool, but a behavioral tether. The device's comforting glow and constant presence create a sense of companionship, as though the machine itself were a guardian. According to the theory, the Pip-Boy was designed to foster trust in technology, training residents to rely on electronic interfaces over human interaction. Generations raised with Pip-Boys may have learned to confide more in screens than in each other, crafting societies that Vault-Tec could control remotely if necessary. Another theory suggests Vault-Tec involved multiple agencies outside the public eye, blending psychological research with classified military projects. Certain vaults contain door frames made of experimental alloys, found nowhere else in the wasteland, hinting at prototype materials tested for resistance to fire, radiation, or even dimensional instability. Theories swirl about vaults that served as testing grounds, not for population survival, but for cutting-edge physics experiments meant to weaponize or harness energy fields. Some believe these experiments left behind invisible scars, subtle fluctuations in reality that explorers sometimes feel as brief disorientation or déjà vu. There are theories that certain vaults were designed to observe emotional inheritance across generations, tracking how trauma, hope, or leadership qualities passed from parents to children. According to this idea, Vault-Tec may have encouraged or suppressed specific emotional environments by adjusting air quality, lighting color, or food supply composition. The goal would have been to shape not just individuals, but their descendants, testing which emotional traits endured. Some vaults, known for unusual generational conflicts, may have been quiet laboratories for the study of inherited identity. And then there is the chilling belief that Vault-Tec never truly planned to release its residents into the wasteland at all. Some blueprints show no viable long-term exit strategies, no external defensive structures, and no transition resources stored near the door. These designs imply that the vault was meant to become a permanent habitat, a self-contained society sealed forever beneath the earth. In this view, the rare vaults that opened did so against Vault-Tec's original intent, breaking the cycle and allowing people to return to a world the company never expected them to see again. Yet one of the softest theories imagines that despite its cruelty, Vault-Tec tried to preserve small pieces of humanity's beauty. Some vaults contain hidden art, tiny doodles etched into inaccessible corners, murals painted behind panels no resident could access, sculptures built into ventilation shafts. These works seem too intentional to be accidents, as though pre-war artists smuggled their hearts into the vault to defy the cold logic of the experiment. Wanderers who discover these hidden creations sometimes feel a pang of warmth, as if stumbling upon a time capsule of tenderness left behind by hands that believed the world might still need beauty even within cages of steel. And perhaps the quietest theory of all lingers in the minds of those who walk the ruined vault corridors alone. It suggests that every vault carries an echo of its original purpose, a faint emotional imprint woven into air and steel. Some were forged from hope, others from fear, and some from cold experimentation. But as the centuries pass, those emotions drift through the halls like intangible ghosts, reshaping the atmosphere with whisper-soft hands. In this idea, the vault itself becomes a storyteller, whispering the memories of those who lived, died, and dreamed within its walls, long after the last echoes of humanity faded into dust. There are wanderers who swear that some vault doors behave differently depending on who stands in front of them, as if the great steel discs recognize certain patterns in posture, breath, or heartbeat. The theory suggests Vault-Tec embedded microsensors in the door frames, tiny machines that were once meant to scan citizens for emotional stress, radiation levels, or signs of illness. Over time, these sensors may have degraded, causing erratic reactions, hesitations, or slow groans of metal, as though the doors themselves are thinking. When the air falls perfectly still, and the vault walls seem to listen, it's easy to believe the entire complex watches from the moment you step inside, trying to judge whether you belong within its forgotten womb of polished concrete and cold blue light. Inside the corridors, the way-long hallways seem to curve slightly, even when drawn as straight lines, has sparked another theory, that Vault-Tec intentionally distorted perspective to weaken spatial memory. Wanderers exploring abandoned vaults sometimes report that certain paths feel longer or shorter depending on their emotional state, almost as though the vault shapes itself around their anxiety or calm. This idea proposes that vault geometry included subtle visual tricks designed to keep residents disoriented, encouraging reliance on overseers for direction. Wall panels might have been installed with angles that shift light just enough to trick the mind, turning simple paths into mazes that adjust with every passing year. Some believe that the constant hum of vault generators continues even after power fades because the walls themselves resonate with leftover vibrations. The theory imagines that the metal was engineered to store sounds the way photographic film stores images. Every argument, every whispered confession, every scream echoing through the vault has been absorbed into the very bones of the place. When you walk through those quiet halls centuries later, the faint hum is not electricity, it's memory, replaying itself in endless loops, the vault murmuring with the ghosts of those who lived and died behind its sealed door. A more chilling theory circles around the idea that Vault-Tec secretly used pheromone distribution systems to influence moods. Some vaults felt inexplicably peaceful even in crisis, while others fell quickly into chaos despite ample supplies. According to this theory, hidden pumps behind the ventilation systems released mood-altering chemicals based on readings from psychological monitoring panels scattered throughout the vault. These panels track stress by analyzing footsteps, vocal tones, and even breathing frequency. The vaults, in this belief, didn't just contain residents, they shaped them, guiding their emotional landscape like gardeners tending to a human crop. There's a theory that the iconic circular vault door wasn't meant as a lock, but as a clock. The pattern of bolts around its circumference, 20 inches most vaults, may represent phases of a long-term psychological experiment. Some believe each bolt correlated with a stage of human adaptation, and that overseers were trained to read these patterns like timepieces, gauging the mental decay or cohesion of their residents. In this interpretation, the vault door didn't just seal people in, it counted down their transformation, measuring the slow unraveling of civilization one bolt at a time. The numbering system of the vaults continues to inspire its own maze of theories. Some wanderers believe certain vault numbers correspond to historical tragedies, as if Vault-Tec designed each vault to reenact emotional lessons throughout American history. Others think the numbers are coordinates to something deeper underground, pointing toward a vast subterranean map that no one has ever fully uncovered. A few imagine a more mystical link, suggesting that vault numbers were chosen based on numerology, encoded messages warning future generations or hinting at forgotten truths. In this view, every vault number becomes a prophecy disguised as an address. There's speculation that Vault-Tec intended some vaults to be neural vaults locations, built not to preserve bodies, but thoughts. According to this belief, certain vaults housed early prototypes of consciousness uploading machines, devices meant to capture neural patterns and store them digitally. While no complete record of such machines has surfaced, fragments of corrupted diaries, strange buzzing machines, and broken medical pods have led some to wonder whether a few vaults succeeded in preserving minds long after bodies perished. The idea that digital ghosts may still wander through vault servers, dreaming of the world they left behind, gives these vaults an aura of technological haunting. A quieter theory imagines that Vault-Tec designed their cafeterias and recreational rooms with subtle psychological gradients. Colors were chosen for their emotional influence, soothing blues to encourage docility, muted reds to stir productivity, and greens to calm anxious minds. Some vaults show a jarring contrast between cheerful posters and oppressive architecture, leading theorists to speculate that the vaults were designed with emotional dissonance on purpose, pushing residents to the brink of mental conflict so that overseers could study stress thresholds. The brightly colored Nuka-Cola machines might not just be refreshments, they might have been part of a psychological test. There are rumors that certain vaults were designed to be laboratories of sound. Instead of testing human social structure or survival skills, they tested responses to specific frequencies. According to this theory, some vault walls contain embedded speakers barely noticeable to the ear, playing tones meant to affect sleep cycles, dreams, or even memory retention. Wanderers have reported feeling uneasy in vault chambers with no visible cause, as though something just beneath hearing range tugs gently at the mind. These vaults might have been musical experiments, symphonies of silence and vibration meant to reshape human thought. Another lingering belief claims Vault-Tec intentionally planted false evacuation warnings before the Great War. These warnings, broadcast on hidden frequencies, may have encouraged certain populations to seek out vaults in panic, entering facilities not through assigned entry programs, but through opportunistic chaos. This theory suggests Vault-Tec wanted unpredictable human samples for experiments, not carefully curated populations. Volunteers could be selected scientifically, but panicked crowds provided raw emotional data, and Vault-Tec craved authentic human behavior under pressure. If true, the vaults were filled not by design, but by the manipulation of fear. A more philosophical theory questions whether Vault-Tec even intended humanity to emerge from the vaults at all. Some believe the vaults were ultimately designed as sealed ecosystems, self-contained worlds built to exist indefinitely beneath the earth. In this interpretation, surface restoration programs were distractions. The real agenda was the creation of subterranean civilizations, humanity reborn in steel cocoons deep below the wasteland. When certain vaults sealed permanently or mysteriously vanished from the map, theorists point to them as possible successes, entire underground societies that may still thrive, hidden from the surface and forgotten by time. Some speculate that Vault-Tec didn't merely anticipate the Great War they may have, orchestrated social changes leading up to it. Theories whisper that the company's reach extended far beyond bunker construction into advertising, politics, entertainment, and psychological conditioning. The cheery mascots, optimistic jingles, and comforting promises could have been tools to soften the population's fear of nuclear doom. Vault-Tec didn't just build shelters, they built a worldview that normalized apocalypse and made the idea of underground isolation strangely appealing. A stranger idea claims that some vaults contain secret lower levels sealed behind structural falsehoods. These are not glitches or collapsed floors, but intentional blind spots hidden behind heavy panels or disguised walls. According to this theory, these lower levels housed experiments so dangerous or morally questionable that not even overseers were told of them. Wanderers who explore vaults often report strange air currents, metallic odors, or echoes from behind supposedly solid walls. In this view, the vaults you see are only half of what exists. The rest remains buried, sealed in darkness, waiting. One theory suggests that the overseer's office wasn't just a command center but a psychological throne. The raised platform, the looming height, the central control panel, all of it may have been designed to elevate overseers above the population both physically and mentally. Over time, vault overseers might feel chosen to rule, as the architecture subtly trains them to view themselves as guardians of the human experiment. The vault, in this theory, shapes not only the residents but the leaders, sculpting their sense of power through the weight of metal and shadows. Then there's the lingering belief that the vault monitors the screens that flicker softly with green glow aren't just displays but watchers. Some theorists claim they were designed to record unconscious facial expressions, track micro movements, and analyze emotional states with machine precision. Even when the screens show nothing but harmless static, they might be collecting data, storing it in long-dead servers, waiting for analysis that will never come. The vault screens become unblinking eyes, watching as generations lived, loved, fought, and fell apart. A softer theory suggests Vault-Tec genuinely did care, but not in the way people hoped. This interpretation sees Vault-Tec as a company that believed humanity needed to be broken, reshaped, or purified before it could rebuild. The vaults were crucibles, not shelters, meant to forge a new kind of human, resilient enough to survive a brutal future. Through controlled trauma, isolation, scarcity, and engineered conflict, Vault-Tec may have sought to create a species evolution alone could not achieve. If true, then every vault, no matter how tragic, was part of an attempt to give humanity a second chance, not through comfort, but through hardship. And finally, there is the gentlest theory of all, that the vaults, for all their cold metal and harsh lighting, were built as sanctuaries of hope by individuals who truly believed they could save someone. Maybe not everyone, maybe not the world, but someone. Engineers who stayed late to perfect oxygen systems, scientists who double-checked filtration units, workers who welded panels with quiet prayers for the people who would live behind them. The vaults may be nightmares, but they were built by human hands, hands that trembled, hands that hoped, hands that tried their best in a world that was already ending. Even in the darkest vault, some echo of that hope lingers, humming in the pipes and flickering in the lights, waiting for someone to hear it. Deep beneath the ruins of America, people often imagine Vault-Tec's architecture as nothing more than concrete, steel, and fluorescent light. But wanderers who study old blueprints notice that Vault-Tech's designs include geometric patterns that serve no practical purpose. Triangles etched into support beams, spirals carved into plating that only engineers would ever see, and honeycomb patterns beneath floors that required specialized tools to fabricate. Some believe these shapes weren't decoration, but coded messages left for Vault-Tech employees, a kind of hidden language embedded in the very bones of the vaults. Others suggest they were meant to reinforce psychological stability, exposing vault dwellers to subliminal shapes associated with calm, order, or obedience. Whatever the truth, these patterns linger quietly, unseen but ever present, shaping the minds of those who walk beneath them. Wanderers who've managed to explore half-collapsed vault corridors often report odd sensations in the air, the feeling that the temperature shifts subtly when turning corners, or that certain hallways feel heavier than others, almost as though the vault itself is breathing in slow, metallic rhythms. Theorists propose that some vaults were built with thin vents connected to hidden thermal regulators, small machines designed to subtly influence mood through environmental control. A warm corridor might soothe anxious dwellers, while a cooler corner could encourage alertness. Over decades, even unconscious changes like these would shape the vault's culture, fostering patterns of emotion without residents ever knowing they were being guided by the walls around them. Another quiet theory suggests that Vault-Tech intentionally designed different vaults with conflicting philosophies, not just to test human behavior, but to test which ideas would survive the end of the world. Vaults built on strict control stand in stark contrast to those founded on freedom or chaos. If humanity were to emerge and rebuild, Vault-Tech may have wanted to know which ideologies would flourish under pressure. According to this theory, each vault is like a seed planted in the soil of the wasteland, carrying with it a blueprint for a society that might someday rise from the ashes. The vaults weren't just experiments, they were prototypes for civilizations. Some wanderers believe that Vault-Tech incorporated a form of psychological echo technology into their PA systems, recordings of old announcements, bits of static, and ambient hum designed to reinforce a sense of routine. These sounds occasionally loop in irregular intervals, creating the uncanny sensation that someone is walking behind you when no one is there. The theory argues that these echoes were meant to simulate a busy environment, preventing the loneliness and isolation of underground living from damaging the mind. Even the faint buzzing in some vaults might be deliberate, a soft reminder that the world hasn't truly gone silent, even if the population outside has. One of the strangest theories involves the layout of vault living quarters. Many rooms seem unnecessarily small, with ceilings just a bit too low and doors that feel slightly narrower than expected. This subtle compression, some theorists claim, was intentional. Vault-Tech may have believed that tighter spaces encourage cooperation and reduce physical confrontation by limiting the ability to move aggressively. Over time, these cramped quarters could nudge a population toward passive behavior, training people to adapt to discomfort rather than fight against it. If so, the vaults weren't just shelters, they were pressure chambers for the psyche, shaping human behavior through architecture. Travelers who have studied old vault schematics sometimes notice missing sections, stretches of hallway that abruptly end, entire rooms that appear on one page but vanish on another. These inconsistencies fuel the theory that Vault-Tech built ghost rooms, chambers that were never intended to be accessed but exist to confuse anyone who tried to map the vault from memory. Perhaps these phantom blueprints were designed to hide sensitive equipment, private testing areas, or backup systems meant only for overseers. Or maybe they were designed to mislead saboteurs who infiltrated Vault-Tec decades before the war. Whatever the reason, the Vault's missing rooms give the impression of a company that valued secrecy even more than survival. Another theory suggests that Vault-Tec experimented with subtle magnetic fields inside certain vaults. These fields, nearly imperceptible to the human body, might influence mood or sleep cycles, creating environments where dwellers remained synchronized with one another. If entire vault populations followed the same circadian rhythms, group cohesion would strengthen, reducing conflict and enforcing routine. But magnetic fields applied incorrectly could cause insomnia, anxiety, or hallucinations, perhaps explaining the strange behavior seen in some vault logs. In this theory, Vault-Tec wasn't manipulating people through words or rules, but through invisible forces humming quietly beneath their feet. It's often noted that Vault-Tec used bright, vibrant colors for their mascots, posters, and signs, even in environments that would have otherwise been bleak. Some theorists think these cheerful aesthetics were more than marketing. They were psychological stabilizers designed to counterbalance the harsh reality outside the vault. Every cheerful Vault Boy smile, every bright banner promising safety for you and your family, served as emotional armor. The theory suggests that Vault-Tec's true engineering marvel wasn't power or water systems, it was hope. Manufactured hope, pumped through hallways like oxygen. Shifting attention to security, another theory claims that the vaults weren't designed to keep people safe from the wasteland, but to keep the wasteland safe from the people inside. Vault-Tec might have predicted that certain vault populations, especially those subjected to extreme experiments, could become dangerous if they ever escaped. Reinforced blast doors, labyrinthine hallways, and narrow choke points weren't built to provide safety but containment. This perspective casts the vaults not as bunkers for the chosen, but prisons for the engineered. Each vault, holding potential threats, meant never to walk the surface. In some vaults, security cameras remain active decades after the war, blinking faintly as though someone is still watching. This has given rise to a theory that the vault monitoring system was never meant to be overseen by humans. Instead, Vault-Tec may have designed a closed-loop AI capable of observing residents indefinitely, analyzing actions, and predicting behavior in real time. If true, the overseer role may have been a facade, a human face for an automated system that controlled everything from lighting to food distribution. The overseers might have been watching the vault, but something else was always watching them. There is also speculation that Vault-Tec may have incorporated experimental memory preservation technology into their systems. Some terminals contain logs that appear to predate the vault's construction or reference individuals who never lived there. These anomalies support the idea that Vault-Tec was trying to record and replay human consciousness, using vaults as massive databanks. If the technology worked, then a vault wouldn't just preserve people physically, it would preserve who they were, storing fragments of memory like files, waiting for a future humanity to rediscover. The vaults become not only shelters, but libraries of the mind. One of the most poetic theories claims that the vaults were built with acoustics designed to encourage reflection, hallways that echo faintly, communal rooms that soften voices, and maintenance tunnels that create a rhythmic hum. All might have been crafted to shape mood through sound. Vault-Tec, in this interpretation, believed that certain tones and frequencies could guide dwellers toward introspection or calmness. The vaults themselves become soundscapes, humming gentle lullabies to the generations trapped inside. And finally, a theory that lingers softly across the wasteland suggests that Vault-Tec never intended for the vaults to open at all. According to this idea, humanity's survival wasn't meant to occur on the surface but underground, where Vault-Tec could craft a society untouched by the mistakes of the old world. The vaults weren't temporary, they were the seeds of a new civilization, intended to flourish in darkness until the surface was forgotten. If this theory is true, then every vault door opened prematurely. Each escape was an unintended rebellion. Vault-Tech's dream remains buried in the depths, waiting for a world that never arrived. Deep beneath the broken highways and the rusted skeletons of old cities, there are vaults whose doors never opened, vaults so deeply submerged into the earth that even the air feels ancient. Some wanderers believe that these sealed chambers were not accidents or failures, but deliberate sanctuaries designed to remain untouched no matter what unfolded on the surface. According to this theory, Vault-Tec created a series of subterranean arcs layered so deeply in bedrock that even nuclear fire could not reach them. The people inside were meant to sleep for centuries, awakening only when the world healed fully. Yet those vaults never stirred, perhaps because the world never reached whatever metric the company established as recovered. These lost vaults lie in perfect darkness, humming faintly with dormant life, dreaming quietly of a world they were never called to rebuild. Another theory imagines that Vault-Tec built more than shelters, they built anchors in time. The strange repeating patterns found in some vaults, the eerie sensation of déjà vu in identical hallways, the way certain lights flicker at precise intervals, all create the impression that vaults might be connected through unseen mechanisms. Some theorists suggest Vault-Tec created a network of synchronized chronal zones where minute differences in time were stabilized to maintain perfect environmental control. If this were true, vault dwellers experience time at slightly different speeds depending on their location underground. The result would be vault populations aging in gently curved timelines, drifting out of sync with the surface world. This theory explains why some vault dwellers who emerge seem a little out of step, like the world moves too fast or too slow for them, as though they walked out of a dream where time pooled like water rather than flowed like a river. There is a quieter theory that suggests the vault's harsh experiments were not the company's primary objective, but merely the scaffolding for something more ambitious. Some believe Vault-Tec's real goal was to discover the point at which society breaks, not to destroy it, but to understand how to rebuild it better. The vaults become crucibles, reshaping human behavior through controlled chaos, forging new social structures through pressure and scarcity. Under this theory, Vault-Tec wanted to observe the birth of entirely new cultural genomes, civilizations grown in sealed ecosystems, whose patterns could be harvested after the war. The experiments then become less about cruelty and more about harvesting the psychology of reinvention. Humanity's worst trials were the fuel for its hypothetical rebirth. Other wanderers whisper about a stranger idea, one that paints Vault-Tec not as a corporation acting alone, but as the visible branch of something older and far less human. They claim the vaults were built with blueprints that do not match the engineering standards of the era, using angles and resonance patterns strangely reminiscent of ancient structures found in remote corners of the wasteland. According to this theory, Vault-Tec's brilliance came from archaeological discoveries buried deep beneath America, artifacts from unknown civilizations, possessing knowledge of energy, geology, and human behavior beyond anything pre-war science achieved publicly. If true, Vault-Tec's experiments become reenactments of much older tests, as though the Earth itself once underwent similar trials in forgotten ages. The vaults become echoes of something primordial, repeating designs older than anything in recorded history. One of the more unsettling theories claims that some vaults were not designed for humans at all. Instead, they were built as enormous behavioral test chambers for machines, not the robots we recognize today, but prototypes for something far more advanced. Under this view, certain sealed vaults contain dormant AI systems designed to simulate human conflict and cooperation. When the bombs fell, these digital societies continued running silently for 200 years, processing simulated lives, deaths, alliances, and betrayals in an endless loop. If such vaults existed, then somewhere deep below the wasteland, entire generations of artificial souls may have lived and died unseen, their choices shaping theoretical models no one is alive to review. The vaults become quiet worlds unto themselves, full of invisible people whose entire civilizations flicker across silicon and memory chips, dreaming futures that will never materialize. Another gentle but haunting theory proposes that Vault-Tec attempted to create vaults with emotional atmospheres, environments subtly tuned to generate specific feelings such as hope, unity, or creative spark. It suggests the vaults were more than metal rooms and corridors. They were psychological chambers, engineered down to the exact resonance of their air ducts and the warmth of their lighting. The color temperature of the bulbs, the hum of ventilation, the rhythm of irrigation cycles, everything may have been designed to influence mood. Some vaults were uplifting, others suppressive, others reflective. Under this interpretation, Vault-Tec measured not only human behavior, but human spirit, testing how emotional climates shape society. If this theory is true, every vault becomes a curated state of mind, a crafted emotion made physical through architecture. There is a theory that some vaults were built to monitor the stars. In the quietest corners of the wasteland, astronomers have noted that certain vault doors align perfectly with constellations during specific times of year. The alignment is too precise to dismiss as coincidence. Some believe Vault-Tec designed these vaults to track celestial patterns that the public was never told about: cycles of radiation, cosmic storms, or deep space anomalies predicted to follow the Great War. According to this view, the vaults were not just shelters from nuclear fire, but observatories meant to watch the sky for something far more ancient and inevitable. What they were waiting for remains unexplained, but the idea that vaults were built to observe, rather than simply hide, lends them a cosmic weight, as though humanity sought shelter not only from its own destruction, but from something older than its species. Another theory whispers of Vault-Tec experimenting with painless immortality, not through biology, but through memory. Some theorists believe that when dwellers recorded logs on terminals, the machines quietly stored their voices, expressions, and linguistic patterns in deeper archives than the visible files suggest. Over decades, these logs could form fully realized imprints of individual personalities, digital ghosts, crafted from thousands of data points. Some terminals in the wasteland appear to respond with uncanny intuition, spitting out error messages or corrupted logs that feel almost conversational. In this theory, the vaults become mausoleums of minds, preserving versions of people who lived and died centuries ago. These digital echoes may not be conscious, but they behave like shadows of those who recorded them, flickering through circuits whenever someone wanders close enough to wake them. A stranger theory imagines that some vaults were not meant to be lived in long-term at all, but to act as transient bridges, places where people passed briefly on their way to somewhere deeper underground. According to this belief, the visible vaults were the first layer of a hidden multi-tier civilization, with deeper layers sealed beneath false floors, disguised walls, or collapsed sublevels. Only the chosen few were ever meant to descend into these deeper realms, where Vault-Tec planned a new society free from the chaos of the surface. If true, the vaults we explore may be only the abandoned lobbies of a world we never see, the surface of a continent-sized underworld hidden far beneath the wasteland. There is a theory that vaults were built with heartbeat sensors not to monitor dwellers' health, but to track emotional intensity across entire populations. According to this idea, the vaults recorded patterns of communal stress, joy, fear, and hope, analyzing them as though human feelings were data points in a vast algorithm. If humanity ever reached a collective emotional threshold, either harmony or collapse, the system may have been designed to trigger events such as opening the vault, sealing it, or activating dormant programs. This interpretation makes the vaults feel eerily alive, reacting to their inhabitants not through mechanics alone, but through emotional resonance, as though the metal corridors could feel and respond to the breath and heartbeat of every soul within. Another theory paints Vault-Tec as the architects of selective destiny. Some believe that the company identified certain bloodlines carrying traits it deemed essential for future civilization resilience, intelligence, creativity, adaptability, and designed vaults to preserve these lines while allowing others to fade. Under this view, the experiments were methods of sorting, pushing human evolution towards specific directions through environmental pressure. The vaults become genetic cradles, sculpting the future of humanity like an invisible artist carving a masterpiece from bone and persistence. The idea is haunting, imagining that every misfortune or advantage inside the vaults was not random, but part of a quiet intention. Some theorists whisper about vaults designed to simulate the apocalypse itself, not protect from it. According to this view, the bombs were not meant to kill everyone, but to test humanity's reaction to catastrophic scenarios. These vaults may have contained elaborate holographic or sensory systems capable of generating illusions indistinguishable from the real world. For inhabitants, their world would seem to have ended, yet everything they experienced would be part of the simulation. If true, some vault dwellers lived through an apocalypse no one else shared, emerging with memories of a war that never touched them. The vaults thus become forges of trauma, sculpting survivors through imagined destruction to prepare them for a real future they were never told about. A more hopeful theory suggests Vault-Tec designed at least a handful of vaults to hold seeds of beauty, art, literature, music, and fragments of culture chosen to reignite human creativity after the war. In these vaults, recordings of forgotten symphonies, rare paintings, and lost books were preserved in climate-controlled chambers. If civilization had collapsed entirely, Vault-Tec intended these vaults to serve as cultural arcs, carrying the last remnants of a world worth remembering. Some explorers claim to have found locked chambers containing remnants of this project, dust-coated instruments, preserved canvases, and music logs stored in still-powered servers, humming softly in the dark. The idea that Vault-Tec preserved humanity's creative soul gives the vaults a softer, quieter purpose, one rooted in memory rather than experimentation. There is a gentler theory that imagines some vaults were designed to test compassion. In these vaults, minor inconveniences, scarcity of comfort items, subtle disagreements, engineered misunderstandings were introduced not to cause suffering, but to observe how people overcame them. The designers may have believed that kindness under pressure was the ultimate resource for humanity's future. According to this theory, Vault-Tec wanted to quantify the exact conditions under which empathy survives, the smallest environmental variables needed to keep compassion alive. These vaults become sanctuaries of soft resilience, places where humanity was tested not for strength or intelligence, but for its capacity to remain gentle despite the world's bitterness. And then there is the most poetic theory, the one wanderers share by firelight when the wasteland grows quiet enough to listen. Some believe Vault-Tec built their vaults not out of fear or cruelty, but out of hope. Hope that humanity could be reshaped into something kinder, more curious, more capable of surviving itself. Under this theory, the experiments were clumsy attempts to understand how people might rebuild the world differently, testing the fragile threads that tie communities together. The vaults become imperfect blueprints for a society that never had the chance to bloom. And even though the company failed, the seeds they planted remain scattered across the wasteland. Wanderers, scavengers, settlers, and dreamers who walk out of those metal doors, carrying inside them the quiet spark of a world that still wants to rise again.